Hello, and welcome. Yes, like you said, I'm Joshua Demetri. I am a principal solutions architect at Valiantys, and Zishan is one of our software architects as well. So if you've never heard of Valiantys, we're a Platinum Solutions partner. We're basically a one-stop shop for everything Atlassian, and one of our major areas of work is our full-stack enterprise software development space, which is where we both come from and why we're here at Atlas Camp. So we want to talk to you about building scalable apps, and in particular about the Forge Style Guide. It's actually a community resource that we have put together in order to kind of compile some best practices and some known solutions that we've found and that other partners and other customers and basically anybody in the community has found to common problems, and to basically create a community engagement around Forge in a way that we want to kind of grow the platform with. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. And I want to start by talking about the importance of consistency. So really the goal here with a style guide and with building scalable apps that are maintainable over time is to build them in a consistent way that you know what you can expect from the code base as you look into it. So consistency brings a lot of benefits. The first one being easier maintenance. So essentially, as you're building your application, if you know what to expect out of the application, if you're consistent across not only just your team, but all the teams in your organization and the entire community, then you can maintain that much more easily. You can keep track of the app, you can have code reviews that are more thorough, so on and so forth. It also helps you adhere to best practices. So in order to be consistent, we have to have basically what is the best way, what is the right way, what is the most successful way to build apps in Forge. And we want to actually adhere to those best practices so that over time we can maintain our applications better, like I said before, but also have that consistency where we know the way that we're going to be building those applications. Another huge benefit to that is an on-ramp for new developers. So a big thing right now in the space is we're going to see is that as these larger enterprise customers are moving into Forge and moving into Atlassian Cloud, they have developers already in-house. We already have these teams existing building software in other platforms, and now we have Atlassian Cloud available to those developers. So we need good ways to bring those developers up to speed with Forge development and with what that looks like. And having consistency across the way you're developing Forge means that those new developers can come in. You can basically hand them some documentation and say, this is how we build applications in Forge. This is what it actually looks like practically. And that's a much faster way to get up to speed than just find your way through the code base and figure out how it works, which is how I've joined a lot of applications, and it's a lot easier when you join basically getting an outline of here's how we build applications and here's the actual structure and best practices. So with that being said, I'm going to hand it over to Zishan to kind of introduce the concept of the Forge Style Guide and some details around that.
Hello, everyone. So the Forge Style Guide, essentially it's the way that we accomplished getting a resource created that we could try and get those three areas that we just covered about consistency put together. And this guide itself is more of I would say, a living document of sorts that contains the best practices, the recommended solutions that we have for building scalable apps that we've seen when working on these applications for our clients. And so having a document there served as a very beneficial purpose so that we can always reference whenever we're building, and together throughout our team, throughout our code, our repositories, we have a reference point, a document to say, this is the best practice, this is how it should be. And having that document there served a really useful benefit, because not only was it built using those real world clients, but those cases, it actually explains, okay, why do we do it this way? Why don't we do it this way? This is not a good example. This is the right example. And it gives examples showing, hey, this is the best practice. This is the recommended solution for building these scalable apps that we've seen. And so they're built with real world concrete examples that we've seen building these large case examples for our clients. And an easy example that we had was, one time we had a client, a very large client that was migrating to Forge, migrating to cloud. And we basically had this style guide. So we said, hey, take a look. What do you guys think? And it was great. And funny enough, the very next question that they asked was, hey, we're trying to understand Forge web triggers, and it's basically just a public endpoint. How do we secure it? Like, what are the best ways for it? And so we're like, okay, so here's the style guide. Jump to the security section. You'll see basically exactly that, the entire question with examples, everything there. So it's got common problems, easy reference points, jumping around to have it in a standard, nice little document. And lastly, the document, the goal of it is to make it essentially sort of a catalyst for the entire community to come together and get involved. So it's not just about Valiantys off in one corner building out what we think is right, and marketplace partners building theirs, or even any other custom solution partner. It's basically saying, as a group together to build this ecosystem, we're all going to come together and take the lessons that we learned building these apps, building these projects, and putting them together, not just for building Forge applications, but anything in the Forge ecosystem. So it's a way for us to improve it. So let's take a little look just at a sneak peek of what the Forge style guide is. On the left-hand side, I'm hoping you guys can see back there, but if not, there's a link at the end. You guys can see it all. So on the left-hand side here, you have basically the folder structure, and that's where we started when we started the style guide, was saying, okay, so what we need is, look, this is the core foundation of an application, so we need to have this really solid. So we started out saying, okay, we are not going to fall into that pattern anymore, because we've all fallen into that pattern of creating a 5,000 line long index file for our Forge application. But as you build these large enterprise client needs, those applications get more and more complex. So that doesn't work anymore. So we came up with this architecture of basically saying, okay, we're going to split up the code base into back end, front end, and even the front end. For example, the project I'm working on, it actually has multiple front ends, and we combine them all together to provide a cohesive experience to the client. And the backend itself, we split it up into different features, and you can even see the function, the file names even have a pattern to them as well. And all of that is going to come together to basically provide a much better scalable application that's easier to maintain and evolve over time. And it ties into the next one, which is essentially where we have the functions and how we lay out that code in it to make it that consistently scalable and easy to maintain. So as you can see, I have a very nice talent of picking really good function names. So I've called it handle web function for the first web trigger. The second one is handle second web function. And they're basically just a placeholder saying, hey, we've got this little function here that's going to be surviving. It's the only purpose is for this. And we separate every function to a separate file. So every file, it has its own concise purpose for itself. So we don't mix anything. And when you have all of this now files, now we create at the bottom, what you see is that barrel file. We have that index file still, but it's going to pull in all that code from that we have everywhere else, and we pull it into that index file so that it's available to anything else we need. And that jumps into the next portion, basically saying, okay, now when we're working on the manifest file, we don't have to write paths anymore, because when you're writing a manifest file, you're writing basically raw strings in there, and you're going to have typos in those paths that you're writing, src, backend, blah, blah, blah. With this way, now that we have a TypeScript file and we're importing in that barrel file, those typos and elimination will just disappear. The manifest file now takes up and says, hey, only thing you need to do is say index dot and whatever that function that you're going to be using. So it eliminates a lot of those issues that you'd hit. On top of that, if you add on the extensions and other tooling that's going to come on top of this style guide, once you're writing that index dot, you just, the ideal way would be you get it autocomplete saying exactly what's available to you, and you just fill it out, eliminating all of these headaches and issues as well as you're building it to make it better and better. So that's the Forge style guide just in a nutshell. Those are just a few core things that we pulled out just to show you a quick example. Now, how do we actually apply this in a team, in a code base? So the first thing is thorough code reviews. And the code reviews are really important because you got to be really, really nitpicky. And even at Valiantys, whenever we do code reviews, we are extremely, extremely nitpicky. And that's a good thing, because when you're nitpicky, you're going to essentially make it so that your code that gets merged, that gets at the end result, it's going to be adhering to those best practices that we've already laid out. So sometimes we may even just pull up the style guide on the side when we're reviewing and say, hey, does it actually match these best practices that we've laid out? Are we doing this the right way or not? And that's step one. So that's making sure that your code is adhering to it. And then step two comes in where we have, code quality tooling that's built on top of the style guide here. And so you can imagine like a linter, for example. So you have linter rules that's going to take these and make sure that, hey, you're actually adhering to them. You can build extensions on top of this on your editor to improve the experience. And we have some tooling like this that we make it so it's easier and easier for us to be able to write code and applications because of all of this put together. And the Forge style guide doesn't actually, if you just look at it from one rule or one rule here, it probably doesn't make that much sense. But when all of it comes together and all of those tools come together, it really, really, really does help. And the last portion of it is that consistent upkeep that we have. And that is why I kind of mentioned it's more like a living document than anything else, because it constantly needs to be maintained. Forge is constantly evolving. Every day we're getting something new. And so as an example, the long-running function just came out. Thank you to whoever made that. But long-running functions came out, and now we have to go, okay, how does that affect the best practices that we've been having? Does that actually change anything? Does that say, okay, we've been doing it this way for a reason. We were trying to find a different solution for it, but now that we have this ability, does that go in and change anything? And so we have constantly like a weekly sync-up call where we just go through these hammer sessions of what's on the changelog, what is it going to affect on the best practices of the style guide. And not just that, we also have whenever we're building an application, we'll come in and say, okay, did you learn anything new or that could be implemented in this style guide that we have throughout our team? Did you find anything that you discovered really didn't help you in those style guide? And we consistently evolve it. And one of the things is it's not just about building applications. So we have different teams. Like, for example, we have a Forge bootcamp as well, which is essentially just a training. And this is part of the training, which is just enabling and providing that training in there. But anyone that works on Forge, they have the ability in the ecosystem come and say, hey, this is the way that we're seeing it works. And we don't really want, this to be, hey, this is what Valiantys thinks is the best way to do it. This is the only way to do it, and it's never going to change. No, it's the exact opposite, right? We want it to be something that everyone can be involved in, that everyone maintains, that everyone builds. And it's not just Valiantys here that says, hey, this is the right way. It's every marketplace partner, it's every custom solution partner, and hopefully even Atlassian coming onto the table and saying, hey, we're setting a standard for developing Forge applications, and these are the best practices for it. And that's the ultimate goal here. And if I keep talking, I'm going to keep going for 5 to 6 days, and I don't think you guys want to sit here for 6 days, so I'm going to let Joshua finish up here.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit more about that community involvement side of things. So we're going to give you a link here in a second, and also as you're walking out, there are a bunch of stickers over by that table that have the link to the style guide as well that you're welcome to take. But essentially the idea behind this, like Zishan was saying, is to really be a catalyst for that community involvement. Because consensus on these best practices across the community is really a community effort. It's not just something that Valiantys can do, because we've seen a lot of things. We work with a lot of customers, a lot of really big customers that we've seen have pretty complex needs, but we haven't seen everything. Right? And so we want to have the entire community contribute what has actually been seen in the real world examples from everyone in the community. And that's an effort that we can all participate in together. And that collaboration brings better results than just Valiantys or just any organization can do on their own. Because if these best practices are fed by what everyone in the community is actually seeing and experiencing and doing in Forge, then at the end of the day, then we're all creating better apps. A rising tide will raise all the ships up, right? So we want to do that with Forge. We want to create that platform growth around Forge using that community engagement around best practices. And that consistent code quality patterns across the community also just means that somebody looking from the outside in saying, hey, this is a Forge platform. How do I actually act in the Forge platform? What does it look like? Kind of taking stock of what exists in the Forge platform. If they look in and see a community that has consensus around best practices, understands what they're building, contributing to those best practices as a community together, well, then what that does is brings more and more people into the community, because this already great community continues to grow more and more into just a kind of like a friendly place to write code and build software and to really bring value to the customer. And that's going to take us to just having the link here, so forgestyleguide.com, so we can get access to it. As Zishan mentioned before, we do have a Forge Bootcamp offering as well, and if you go to the style guide as of right now, there's a big banner at the top for 20% off that Forge Bootcamp, so we actually have a public offering of that coming up soon that you can kind of get spots in, or we can do private offerings for Forge Bootcamp as well, and there's a discount on that site, as well as a link on there for that community involvement for the GitHub page of the style guide. So it is open for pull requests, and if anybody has things they've experienced or like this is the best practice that I have found for this particular scenario, or you have comments that you want to give on what we've laid out as our best practices, then make a pull request, add a comment, let's have a conversation around it, let's get the community involved in that, and create, a larger and larger resource that, kind of has a reach out into the entire community. So hopefully you find that helpful, and hopefully we get some more community involvement and kind of see you in the pull requests of the Forge Style Guide. And we just look forward to growing the community and building better apps as time goes on. So thank you for your time.